Welcome to Scribecast, the new podcast from the Heritage Foundation Center for Media and Public Policy. My name is Lachlan Marquet.
I'm Rob Louie.
Today on Scribecast, we're joined by Congressman Darrell Issa, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you do to get the word out on so many important issues.
Congressman, I wanted to ask you about some of the things you're working on at the committee. One of the things that we've seen in the news a lot lately is Operation Fast and Furious. Can you bring our listeners up to speed on what that is and why you're investigating it?
Well, it's hard to explain whether Fast and Furious was a bad idea, badly executed, that led to Americans dying, or some would say it might have been a good idea if it had been done differently. What we know is that over the history of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Fire agency or bureau trying to stop guns from going, they never before let them intentionally walk, in this case 2,000 or more weapons, walk into the hands of the worst drug cartels and criminals on both sides of the border. That was the plan. That's what they did, and we're trying to make sure they never do it again.
Now, are you satisfied with the response that you're getting so far from the Obama administration?
Well, the administration admits that they outright stonewalled for the first 90 days. But they would like to have credit for having some cooperation now. Is it sufficient? No. Is it anything close to the most transparent administration in history? Of course not. But we are beginning to break down the walls of silence and refusal. And one of the reasons is, and I owe a big thank you to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Fire Acting Director Kenneth Melson, and more than 20 Alcohol, Tobacco, and Fire agents around the country who came forward and gave us information and helped us understand this program. These people knew the program was wrong, and they came forward and said so.
So, Congressman, do you foresee Fast and Furious being used as a pretense for further gun control measures? Is that a possibility?
It's more than a possibility. My understanding is they dropped a piece of legislation today related to gun control, and, of course, the Deputy Attorney General working for Eric Holder and the President has ordered that rules be changed, asking our licensed gun shops to do additional reporting, essentially build a database of a substantial amount of people buying weapons in 4 southwestern states. So there's no question people are taking a disaster of the making, made by the government, done by the government with your tax dollars, and using it as an excuse to force through gun control that they certainly wouldn't have gotten through the House or the Senate, even under Democrats.
Now, Congressman, this week on another issue, you suggested that the White House may have engaged in an array of potentially illegal fundraising behavior. Can you describe that behavior and why it may be illegal?
Well, Rob, the president has a right to meet with anyone he wants to, and we respect that. We also want to make sure the president is protected while meeting with those people. But recently in the White House, the Democratic National Committee recruited and brought a group of donors to the White House for what they tried to call a policy briefing. They did it in the Blue Room. They did it as a government official activity. The government photographers took pictures that were given to these individuals of their meeting with the president. If it's official, the Democratic National Committee should not have picked the people and should not have been there. If it was a political event of that sort, certainly government photographers and the assets of the White House should not have been used. And we're trying to get to the bottom of which one of those two mistakes was it?
But doesn't every White House do this?
You know, one of the problems my committee deals with is every president wants to rely on the sins of the past. Everyone who sits in my position has an obligation to look and say, what is the current law and regulations and priorities and statements of this president, and are they living up to it? In this case, this is not right for this president to do when he said he was closing down the political office and he wasn't going to do politics out of the White House. It's wrong on a legal basis, and there are existing regulations against it. And most importantly, we have an obligation to ask on behalf of the American people, are taxpayer dollars being used to reelect the president? It was wrong, I'm sure, all the way back with Richard Nixon. And since that time, our committee has had an obligation, when we see it, to expose it and to stop it.
Now, Congressman, you've also recently unveiled a very ambitious plan to save the U.S. Postal Service. Can you describe that, how you would go about saving it?
The Postal Service is a semi-private entity. Even though it's a government entity, it's run like a private entity, and it's losing $8.5 billion this year. It lost about the same last year. And if we do nothing, those losses will increase. But one of the things that's interesting about the business model is it actually can be profitable fairly quickly if they make the same kinds of changes you would expect to make in the private sector. One of them is going from 6-day to 5-day delivery. Not necessarily desirable, but it saves $3 billion. Taking mail delivery, which most of us receive at the front of our house or at a box nearby, and moving all of America to that same service saves $5.5 billion a year. Retiring, thanking very much, give them a go watch if we need to, retiring about 150,000 workers who are fully vested, fully ready to accept their retirement immediately, and since they're excess, thanking them for their service and reducing the rolls of the post office by the amount no longer needed after 20% decline just in the last several years in postal service. You do those three things, the post office is profitable without a rate increase. You don't do those, we will be subsidizing with tax dollars the delivery of mail and postal activities. Now, there's a lot else in this bill. There's a lot more savings, and we lay it all out because we want to make sure the post office a decade from now is debt-free and able to deliver the services people still want.
Well, Congressman, I'm always impressed with everything that you have going on at the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. It seems like there is no issue, and postal reform is one of them that you're not afraid to tackle. So I must ask, in wrapping up here, what's the favorite part of the job as chairman?
Well, the best part of the job are the things that you sometimes don't hear about. Often we'll send a letter or even make a phone call to an agency that is wasteful or doing something wrong, and we find cooperation. And being a former CEO, the items that are resolved quickly and that save money and that get things on the right track, those are the ones you go home saying, boy, I had a good day. We have some good days. When the public gets to see things like Fast and Furious or the need to force the post office to do what you and I would do in our own lives, they see our failures in some sense where we have to go much further to get things done. But it's our obligation, and it's what this committee does. Government oversight and reform has always been about if they won't do it voluntarily, we make sure that they're exposed for their inefficiency and waste.
Chairman Darrell Issa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Anytime. Thanks a lot. Have me back.